Okay, we are going to talk about maternal mortality. Maternal deaths are really common in our facilities. We know that every day around the world, about 800 women die as a result of complications of childbirth itself, complications in the puerperium, and complications that are associated just with pregnancy itself. Here in Zambia, we have somewhere in between 600 to 800 deaths every year that are recorded, but we know that that's the tip of the iceberg. The counting can be better, and when it becomes better, we're going to record more maternal deaths. The big causes of maternal deaths in the country are hemorrhage. I think it accounts for about 20% of maternal deaths, depending on where you are. Then we have hypertensive disorders having a contribution. We have infections, and then we have abortion-related causes contributing about around 7% of maternal deaths. So the purpose of this tutorial is really to understand the terminology that is associated with maternal death so that we can build on from there. So the first thing that we need to know is what is a maternal death. So a maternal death is a death of a woman while pregnant, or the death of a woman within 42 days of termination of pregnancy. This is regardless of the site or the duration of the pregnancy, and the death is really regardless of the cause. It can be from any cause, but that cause is related to or aggravated by the pregnancy or the management of that pregnancy, but not due to incidental or accidental causes. So this is a big definition. So for you to call something a maternal death, you have to have a woman that dies. They have to die within 42 days of termination of pregnancy or while pregnant. The size of the pregnancy does not matter. How long they have been pregnant does not matter. The cause of the pregnancy really does not matter. It can be from any cause, but that cause needs to be related to or aggravated by the pregnancy or its management. So that's the first bit of the definition. The second bit is that we have what are called direct maternal deaths, and then we have what are called indirect maternal deaths. So direct maternal deaths are those deaths that are a result of the complications of pregnancy itself. So when you say this is a direct maternal death, what you mean is that if a woman was non-pregnant, it was impossible for her to die from that cause of death, really, generally speaking. So meaning that things like ectopic pregnancy are direct maternal deaths, because a woman who's not pregnant can't die from an ectopic pregnancy, or even a man cannot die from an ectopic pregnancy. So that's a direct maternal death. A man or a non-pregnant woman cannot die from a molar pregnancy. So that is an example of a direct maternal death. A woman who's not pregnant cannot die from postpartum hemorrhage. So postpartum hemorrhage is an example of a direct maternal death. A death from septic abortion. A woman who's not pregnant cannot die from a septic abortion. So septic abortion is an example of a direct maternal death. We move on to what is an indirect maternal death. So an indirect maternal death is a death of the same woman as we've defined while pregnant within 42 days of termination of pregnancy and so on. But that cause of death is a cause of death that pre-existed before pregnancy, or that condition developed during pregnancy, but pregnancy worsened that condition, or the management of pregnancy worsened that condition, or went in the way of managing that condition. Then we'd call that kind of cause of death, or that kind of maternal death, and indirect maternal death. Examples would be cardiac disease in pregnancy. We know the volume changes that happen when somebody's pregnant. So if somebody dies of heart disease in pregnancy, we would call that an indirect maternal death. If somebody dies of malaria during pregnancy, that's an indirect maternal death, basically because we know that non-pregnant women can die from malaria in pregnancy. But in this case, we are demonstrating that the pregnancy worsened the malaria, maybe because of parasites residing in the placenta and so on, or because of the immunosuppression that pregnancy causes, so this woman easily got malaria. Things like anemia in pregnancy, those are indirect causes of maternal death, because we know that hemodilution during pregnancy that happens can worsen anemia that is pre-existing. So anemia in pregnancy would be a good example of an indirect maternal death. So then we have what we call late maternal deaths. So late maternal deaths are those deaths that happen after 42 days. So we know that this woman died from complications of pregnancy, but they have not really fitted in that definition of maternal death, which is saying that you have to die within 42 days of delivery or 42 days of termination of pregnancy. So that would be called a late maternal death. It happens after 42 days, but it does not need to exceed a year. So anything that happens between 42 days to a year, that would qualify to be called a late maternal death. In the ICD, we have ICD-10 and now ICD-11. In ICD-11, they have actually tried to combine these early and late maternal deaths and have a category which is called comprehensive maternal deaths. But we know that generally in this country, we are not counting late maternal deaths. When we say maternal deaths, we are counting those deaths that are happening within 42 days of termination of pregnancy and within 42 days of delivery. Before we get to calling something a confirmed maternal death, of course, there's a process. Isolating and identifying maternal death is a process. So where it starts from is where we have a death of a woman of reproductive age. So when a death of a woman of reproductive age happens, then we have to interrogate the files, interrogate the information so that we find out the pregnancy status of that woman. So if she's pregnant at that moment, or if she was pregnant within the last 2 months, what we are going to call that is a suspected maternal death. Then after we get more information and we decide that the cause was not incidental or accidental, then that qualifies to be a probable maternal death. Then finally, if all the components of the definition that we had at the beginning fit in, then that is what is called a confirmed maternal death. One of the problems we have with reporting and underreporting maternal deaths is that people want to report what they think is a maternal death, but the guidelines are that we need to notify the province, we need to notify the district when we have a suspected maternal death. So that's what should be notified and that's what should be reported. So once that is notified, then we can get more information from the family, from the facilities where the patient was, and then we can decide whether that was a confirmed maternal death, or it was an incidental death, or it was an accidental death. So that is the terminology that we are using now, which is associated with maternal mortality. So in summary, we need to know what a maternal death is, what a direct maternal death is, what an indirect maternal death is, and what a late maternal death is. Once this is clear, we won't have problems. So thank you. until we talk about something else.